Close it.
What's up, guys? It's William. We got James here with us.
How's it going?
And today we're going to be talking about yesterday's news tech. This is one of the easiest techniques for growing mushrooms almost anywhere in the world. Pellet machines are very inexpensive, for less than $2,000. And I know that some places in the world that might seem expensive, but as a collective, this is something that is a very efficient machine and something that has a lot of utilitarian purposes. The reason that I bring up the pellet machine is because we're going to be using pelletized sawdust or pelletized newspaper. This is yesterday's news, can be bought at almost any pet store in the United States. And this pelletized newspaper, for whatever reason, I don't know if there's heat or the pressure that goes into pelletizing it, just makes it so much better for not having to be worried about being sterile or super sanitary when we're working with these procedures. I've done all sorts of other techniques with paper, and paper you usually don't have to be very sanitary at all. We are going to be adding alfalfa, which adds a little bit more nutrients, and I still have not had any issues without sanitizing this. So I do think that pelletizing machines might make this a little bit more efficient, but at the end of the day, we do not need a pelletizing machine. At the end of the day, we can just use newspaper. So any of the methods that you see us rocking with today, we can utilize just newspaper. So you can think of, you can go out and get this yesterday's news pelletized newspaper, or you can just use newspaper, paper, cardboard in a similar fashion. I do like the material. I do like the texture of the material once it's hydrated for mushroom cultivation. I feel like mushrooms really like this coarse material. It's light. It's also light and airy. It holds a fair amount of moisture, so the mycelium, the body of the fungus, can grow through this very well without being oversaturated. So I really like the way that the material comes out when it's hydrated. So if you are going to be working with cardboard or any other type of paper, I would recommend shredding it or something of that nature so that you can get it to a nice texture like this here. All right, so let's get this rocking. The first things that we're going to get started with is our yesterday's news, which we've acquired at General Pet Store here in the United States. Hopefully that you can find something similar in whatever country you're in. You're going to be looking for something that is at least 99% recycled newspaper. And again, you can use newspaper, but I really like the texture of this material, and it's very inexpensive. And if you do get a community pelletizer, a pellet system, a pellet mill is what they're called, this could become free. And then we also have alfalfa pellets. So alfalfa is a type of grass that is also pelletized here, and this adds a little bit more nutrition because there's not that much nutrient in the newspaper. It's mostly cellulose. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding just a little bit more nutrition for our mushrooms to grow big, bountiful, delicious, and nutritious mushrooms. So we're going to get started with the yesterday's news. For this technique, we're going to be doing a 10-part technique of dry materials with 8 parts yesterday's news. And for our parts, we're going to be doing pints. And then we're going to be doing 2 parts alfalfa. So you can think 20% your paper cellulose material, and then 2 parts of your additional nutrient. You could do beet pulp, and you can get away. You could do soybean hulls, cottonseed hulls at the 20% ratio, and you can get away with utilizing coffee grounds if they were brewed that same day. Once coffee grounds are left out for a little bit, they do become big vectors of contamination, meaning that they can become easily contaminated. So let's get this cracking. We're going to go 8 parts yesterday's news and 2 parts alfalfa pellets. While James is filling up the rest of these newspaper pellets here, I'm going to go ahead and put some isopropyl alcohol. You can use 70%, you can use 91%. You can actually even just use hand sanitizer just to clean off your hands. even though we don't have to be entirely sanitary for this, we could do this outside with our bare hands. We do want to make sure that we eliminate any potentials of this going wrong. You don't want to be wasting your time. We're all ready to go here?
Yeah.
Good to go? All right, so we have to do a 1-to-1 mix with water. So we have some filtered water. You're going to want a clean water source. You're not going to want to use a fresh water source like from a creek or a river. If you have access to a spring or a well, that's going to be your best bet. If you have access to some sort of water filtration system, that's also a really good way to go. And if you have access to rainwater, that is a good way to go, but you're going to want to make sure that you filter it and use it fairly soon from when it rained. You're going to want to make sure that you're staying away from adding any other organisms into the mix. So try and think of just the cleanest water you have access to, put it in here, and you should be fine. And if you are worried about it being contaminated at all, the one step that you can take to make sure that this will stay as clean as you possibly can is to, at this step, add your part of water as a boiling water. So you would add boiling water to this mix right now, and then wait till it cools down. And that steam and that heat would kill off organisms and give you a better chance of your fungus, your mushroom mycelium, being the one that wins this food source. Just need 2 more.
Yes,
you will notice with the boiling water, if you do use warm water, that your material will hydrate a lot faster. And we're looking to get it to a field capacity. And what this means is that the material is holding enough water that it's not dripping with water when you pick it up, but when you squeeze it, water will come out. So it's holding as much water as it can without being oversaturated where the water's coming out of it. It's like really appealing.
Yeah, it's like a stress ball, kind of.
Yeah, it does feel like a stress ball.
Can make mushrooms easy with stress out.
But yeah. All right, so we're trying to get a homogeneous mix right now. We want everything to be as blended as it possibly can be. So we want the alfalfa to be as mixed in with the newspaper as it possibly can be. Yeah, if you're going to be doing this method, definitely make sure your hands are at least washed. And at this point, you're just going to want to make sure that all of the pellets are broken up as much as they can be. If you're noticing that you're having a lot of pellets that are still whole, you might want to add a little bit more water. I don't see any standing water left in here. This does feel like a good consistency, but it feels like it could use a little bit more water.
Can I add maybe another cup and go from there?
Yeah, let's add 1 more cup.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had to squeeze a significant amount for water to come out. That I think it can handle a little bit more water with without being overly saturated. And we want there to be a significant amount of water because mushroom fruiting bodies are mostly water. The actual mushroom is mostly water. So it's going to be converting a lot of this water into the mushroom. So we want to make sure there's as much moisture in there as we possibly can. Yeah, that's reaching.
Definitely need that a little bit more.
I think it can handle 1 more cup. Let's
Yeah,
do
I
one
think
more cup.
maybe the alfalfa soaks up a little more or something.
Yeah. My brain thinks like a mushroom, and right now my brain is like food.
So
like,
yeah, so like right now we're at 12 parts water to our 10 parts of pellet. Correct?
Yeah. So yep, 12 parts water to our 10 parts pellet is where we're at right now. Oh yeah, that's great. Mushrooms, dude. Mushrooms would be like, if you just left this in my basement, like in a couple days and came back and peeled
Something
it back,
would be growing on.
there'd be so many things growing in here. This is ideal food for a fungus. It's exactly what a mushroom wants to eat. There's not too many other things that want to eat this. The newspaper has been sanitized to some extent. I mean, I'm sure you've seen paper on the street or cardboard on the street that's been rained on multiple times and doesn't have a bunch of things growing on it. Doesn't have a bunch of mushrooms growing on it or anything really, because of the treatment that it goes through. But mushrooms are really beautiful in the way that they can break down compounds. So like the inks and things like that, we don't really necessarily have to worry about with the newspaper, because the mushrooms are capable of breaking down petroleum-based inks and soy-based inks into less harmful compounds. So, very, very beautiful transmutation. But that's great. You hear that? We got that squeeze. There's a little bit of water dripping out. That's that field capacity. That's exactly what we want. So James is going to take some of this material, and I'm going to keep half of this material. And we're going to introduce 2 different types of mushrooms to our substrate today. All right, so what did I get? All right, I got the pink oyster mushroom.
We got a blue oyster.
All right, so the pink oyster mushroom is a more tropical oyster mushroom. This one is going to work very well for anybody that is around equatorial areas of the planet. Pink oyster, this is Pleurotus des Amours. I love that amour in the pink. It's like a heart kind of vibe, love kind of vibe. Great one if you're living near anywhere that stays warm most of the year. If you're living in any northern areas, this is more of a niche kind of, this is a novelty thing. This isn't something you want in a northern area. If you're in a northern area, you're going to want to work with the blue oyster mushroom. This is going to be an all year, ride or die, going to be a production crop. This is what you're going to want to work with. This one can also tolerate warm weather, but not as hot as the pink oyster mushroom. So 2 different things for 2 different applications. We're working with nature to be as efficient as we possibly can. So even throughout the year, I will switch to cultivating pink oysters in the summertime, so I don't have to expend as much energy in the sense of spending money on utilities to cool down my mushroom grows, to grow mushrooms that don't want to be growing in the hot weather. I'd rather switch the species that I'm growing to save money on energy. When it's cold in the wintertime, I'm not going to grow pink oysters. I'm going to switch to blue oyster mushrooms, so I don't have to spend as much money heating up my grow room because the mushroom is ready to grow in a colder environment. So we have our mycelium here on grains. Depending on where you are in the world, there are different agricultural distributors that you can buy these grains from. In the United States, it is very easy to get access to grain spawn. In different countries, you might have to go through your government's Department of Agriculture to be able to access grains that has mycelium on it. So figure out the best way to get that wherever you are. I'm sorry I don't have many resources, but I do wish you the best of luck in researching and finding that out. But what you're going to want to do is break it up. So they're all stuck together. I'm going to just kind of bounce it on my knee there, break it up, the mycelium. I'm then going to take a little bit of this alcohol and sanitize my jar that has the mycelium in it. Try your best not to get any alcohol on your mycelium. Make sure you remember what everything is labeled, because if you're using alcohol, you might wipe off your markings. So I'd say, what did we do? 12 parts dry material?
It was 12 parts. Oh, no, it was 10 parts dry to 12 parts
10
water.
parts dry material. So if grain spawn is expensive where you live, you can get away with doing 1 part of of grains to your dry material. So James has 5 pints worth of dry material in his container, and I have 5 parts worth of dry material in my container. So that means that I could do half of this pint jar and get away with it. If you're noticing you're having issues in you're having other fungus or bacteria or pests out competing your mycelium, you might want to go ahead and bump it up to going into 2 parts per 10 parts. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to add half of this pint jar, and James is going to add half of his pint jar into our mix. If I can get this thing open, there we go. about half. So I can save this and use this the rest of this again later. Even though I've opened this, all of the grains are full of the mycelium, so there's not really anything that can outcompete this. So I can save this and use it again later. I'm noticing a sweet smell of mycelium right now. The mycelium shouldn't smell funky. It shouldn't smell vinegary. It shouldn't smell like alcohol. It should have like a fresh and kind of sweet smell. This shows healthy mycelium. So you see James and I are kind of waving our hands off. We don't want to start digging into here with wet alcohol on our hands. Alcohol sanitizes on evaporation. So if we were to go in here with the wet alcohol, there's potential that we could be damaging our mycelium that we have in here. So we're going to wait till our hands are dry, and then we're going to mix our mycelium into our substrate. Now that we have a nice thorough mix, we're going to put this into the container that we're going to let the mycelium grow onto the substrate, and we're also going to actually let the mushrooms grow out of. So the containers that I'm going to be utilizing are these common plastic containers that can be found anywhere in the world. These can be reutilized over and over again. So after you utilize them to grow these mushrooms, you can clean this out with water and soap. Sanitize it with hand sanitizer. It's literally everywhere in the world right now. And then add your mushroom substrate over again. So if you're worried about it being plastic, don't worry, you can utilize this over and over and over and over again. And simply grow mushrooms whenever the mycelium is grown through, and we'll show this at another part of the video or a separate video, part 2, where you just open the top and the mushrooms will just grow right out of the top. So this is a very efficient way of growing mushrooms. And if you start collecting these every time you order Chinese food, every time you order takeout, you'll have plenty of these for free, pretty much. James is going to be utilizing another source. You want to talk about that and why this is might be efficient for anybody in the world?
So this is even potentially more low tech than that. Everybody seems to have an endless collection of plastic garbage bags laying around their house. So these can also be utilized as fruiting bags as well.
How would you recommend somebody grow mushrooms out of that bag once the mycelium's grown in?
So basically once your mycelium has grown the whole way through and you're at a point where you're ready to fruit, I would recommend probably just cutting some X's in the bag and hanging it like you would like a fruiting block that you see like behind us here. So it's kind of a similar tech to that, but definitely a little more low budget and cost efficient for people. So about how much of this would you recommend? If they can fill up?
Well, that's really up to the person. So the more of this substrate that you put in this bag, the bigger mushroom you're gonna get, the smaller mushroom you're gonna get. So I mean, I'd probably put about at least 2 pounds per bag. So you can weigh it out. If you have a scale, I don't think this is a good pound, this is a gram scale, but you can weigh them out. I'd say at least 2 pounds in a bag like that. For these containers, just really put as much as you can. I really wouldn't recommend going any smaller than this. I'm not sure how many ounces this one is, but I can put it in the description or put it on the bottom of the video.
Now, like that's feeling probably about 2 pounds or so to me. Would you?
Or
would you say maybe about like half of one of the?
Yeah, let's go 4 pounds. There's no reason not to go
okay.
bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to go for like that like visual aspect of like either the half bag or.
These lids are the hardest lids to get on.
Oh no, I remember fighting them on before. So another thing that's convenient about these is once you have them sealed up, you have left yourself with nice little handles to hang from something. Like that.
Do you know why this might be better for somebody than that green bag?
No. Could you elaborate?
I can see in here.
Oh yeah, that is. So it would be tough to kind of gauge as far as like.
I mean, if you can utilize clear bags, I mean, you can kind of see through them. They're semi-translucent, but you are going to want to be able to check. So if you're using a bag that you can't see through as well, I would recommend after about 7 days from this initial introduction of the substrate that you look in there and see if it's full of white mycelium or if it has any other colors in there. If there's anything that's not white that's growing on there, if you see blues or greens or yellows or weird smells or anything like that coming out of it, it might be unsafe to continue with.
So I wouldn't do that second knot then that I did on that one until you know and you're ready to hang your bags.
The more and more I farm, the more and more this feels exactly like feeding my animals outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, feeding another organism.
Yeah. This feels no different than like feeding a dog to me, or like feeding like the donkeys or the goats. But like I feel like it's different because I feel like I have a more personable relationship with fungus.
Oh, thank you. So just like a little side thought question: if people are utilizing the bag tech, you're wanting to leave like a good space of air in there as well, or would that not matter as much?
It's not necessary.
Okay.
You don't necessarily need to press the air out either. It's not something you need to like really be too concerned with.
One way or the other.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a thought that I was having as I was doing it.
For these containers that we're using here, I am going to poke a tiny little hole in the lid.
Okay.
And you can just use a tiny little end of a knife and just poke a tiny little hole. That's all you need. If you have like a Band-Aid or something you can put over it, put a Band-Aid on it, or like a piece of medical tape on it so it can breathe. But if you don't, just poke a couple tiny little holes. Goodness gracious. Oh my God. Yeah, you can start poking some holes in the top, just like a little hole, and we'll cover them with the medical tape. So this hole that James is putting into the containers is to help the mushrooms breathe. The mushrooms, as they start to break down, the fungus, as it starts to break down the material that it's growing on, it's going to start producing carbon dioxide, which could suffocate if it's closed in a container. So it needs to get some fresh air in there. So we're just poking little holes for some fresh air exchange to happen.
So then I'm just sticking the tape right over top of the hole like that.
All right, so the last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure we label this. Just keep track of everything. So these are my pink oysters. And today is the
22nd.
22nd. Here we go. Let's grow. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.